Hey, this is Jay. This is a quick tutorial for inserting images into Google Docs and Google Slides using n8n. So I have an image here that I'm going to insert into a Google Doc and to Google Slides, and I'm getting all the metadata about which image and files to use through Google Sheets. So if I go ahead and run this quickly, you will see that I'm going to update this image here in Google Docs and this image here in Google Slides with an image. So you can see it just did it there and should be doing it here as well. So there we go. A pretty straightforward system. And let's go ahead and actually walk through it. So I'm going to go ahead and start it from scratch. Actually, first I'm going to reset this real quick. So I've got my image here. I am using a simple ready status and then changing it to updated once it's been changed, just so if you have a bunch of rows here, it doesn't keep running to the same one. And let's go ahead and add a placeholder back. So I'm going to be using a simple image here placeholder to know where to put the image. Get rid of the last one. And then same with this, going to just use the same image here placeholder for that as well. So there we go. Okay. So now that the system's all ready, I was triggering manually. You could also probably trigger off of like a schedule or something. So say at 9 a.m., go ahead and start this workflow. And so the first thing, like I mentioned, is we're going to go to Google Sheets and get all of our data. So I am just using names. So if I go ahead and do image sources is the name of my spreadsheet that has all my data. And I'm just using names of the files. So actually you don't even need the file name. So the image name, the document name, and the slides name. So we're going to have to search for them because we don't have the IDs, and we will need IDs to be able to reference everything. So in Google Sheets, though, I am referencing the image sources Google Sheet, Sheet 1, and I am going to filter, like I mentioned, by status to ready. So we're only going to grab columns that have status ready. If you have a ton of them, you may need to add a limitation on here as well to make sure you don't get everything. But I only have one row right now, so we're just going to go with the next row that has a status of ready. So that gives us the name of all the files we're going to work with. So with that, the first thing we're going to do is get the image. So I'm going to actually search for that because I don't have the ID. So I'm going to do a Google Drive node, and I'm going to do search files and folders. And in that case, we have our image name. So I'm going to drag image name into search query. And that should help us find our image on Google Drive. And then I'm going to limit it to one, so we just find the one. Go ahead and execute. And that gives us an image ID. So now that we have the ID, let's go ahead and actually rename this. We're going to say get image ID. Cool. The first thing actually that we need to make sure happens is that this image needs to be shareable, because otherwise it will not be accessible to APIs. So in this case, right now it is shared, but by default, depending on how you're uploading the image, it may be restricted. So that first step is just to make sure that that is not the case. So what I'm going to actually do is we're going to go back to Google Drive, and we're going to do share file. So share file. And now that we have the ID, we can just get the image by the ID that we just got. And there we go. So I'm going to add a permission. So I don't know if you just saw that, but we're under permissions. I'm going to say add permission, and I'm going to just say reader, because it just needs to be able to read the image. That's all. Not downloading or not, editing or whatever. And in this case, I'm going to say anyone. If you wanted to be a little more secure about it, I guess you could actually designate which domains have access. So basically like n8n, Google Docs, and then, whatever other business domains. I'm going to leave it as anyone. So anybody that has the image, has the link to the image, can actually see the image. I don't think that's that big of a deal. I'm going to go ahead and execute that. So now the image should be shareable. So as you might have saw, it was private, shared only with me with the lock. But now that we've updated it, it's now back to anyone with the link can see the image. So that's part of what we need to do to be able to use it with the API, to be able to upload into the document. So the image is shareable. We can now use it in the future. So let's go ahead and get our document. So now I'm going to search again, like I mentioned, because I don't have the Google Docs ID for this yet. So I'm going to do a Google search, or Drive search rather, and we're going to pull in the document name for the search query value. And we're going to limit it to 1 and go ahead and search. And that should give us the ID for our image. Image goes below Google Doc. And I'm going to rename this to get doc ID. Cool. So there we go. Now we have our ID. And now we can finally go to the Google Docs node and we can get the content. So we can get a document and we can drag in that ID directly to be able to get that document. And that will include our content. So we have the entire content of the document, pretty small at this point, but at least we have everything that's in that doc. So now I'm going to do a couple things to make this a little bit easier in the future. So first, I'm going to do a set. So like I mentioned, I'm going to do image or image placeholder. Doesn't really matter what you name it. So, but in this case, this part matters. I'm going to grab that image here, placeholder, and paste it here. And then we're going to set image placeholder. So we're just making that value available in the future because we're going to use it actually a few times. So we have set our placeholder. And I mean, I might have misled you there too, because like I copied it out of here, but really you probably would predetermine here and then just make sure that you are using that same placeholder in both your documents. So whatever you end up using that, you go ahead and set that here and make sure that it goes into your documents in the future. So now that we have that, the next thing is that we need to find where in the document to insert the image. And so that's what the image placeholder is for, but we have to do it in kind of an indirect way. So we need to find the image index. So I'm going to say image index, and I'm going to use an expression here to then look through the content. So we have all the content of the Google Doc. I'm going to find the index of, and then I'm going to drag that placeholder value right into the quote or the parentheses there. And there we go. That will give you the index of where we want to insert the image. So in this case, it's 18. And this is just based on however Google does its indexing within. So I think it's actually by like character, but it's probably like a column or a row element too. But it found the position of this placeholder of image here. So again, we need to reference that in the future. So all we're going to do is set that image index value so we can use it in the future. But with those two things, I think we're good to go. So the first thing we're going to do is update the document. So we're going to go back to Google Docs. And unfortunately, we can't just, not update. We're going to update the Google Doc. So let me get the ID. So we have the Google document ID from earlier. And unfortunately, we can't just replace it with an image. So we're going to do update, find and replace text is the action. And we're going to replace the placeholder. So we're going to find the old text and just replace it with nothing. Now, it'd be nice if we could just replace it with an image. Unfortunately, we'll have to use the API to do that instead. And unfortunately, there aren't really any options in here. It's just kind of like the structure of the document itself. So we're gonna have to stick with the API. So for now, we're just gonna get rid of that placeholder so that we can put the image there instead. And since we've already saved the index, we don't have to worry about where it comes from. And actually, let's go ahead and change that to set image index. Cool. So we've updated the document, and so that's gotten rid of that image placeholder. So now we can finally do the request to insert the image that we want to add. So let me go ahead and grab this from the previous. So the request node, we are calling this API. So I'm going to drop in the URL here, and I can include that in the description below. I actually have it hard coded, so I'm going to get rid of that. So we need the document ID to be in here. So we change that to expression. And we're going to drag the document ID in here. So we are updating the same one. So the URL is docs.googleapis.com/v1/documents/ whatever the document ID that we're updating. So right here, and then :batch update. So now it knows that we're going to update that document specifically. We are going to do authentication. And I mean, I've been using predefined credentials. I guess the prerequisite here also is that you would need to go to Google Console and create a Google client so that you can add the APIs for Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, Google Drive. So I have a video that actually walks through creating that Google client to be able to connect it to n8n. So if you want to check that out, you can. But this is assuming you've already gone through that process, which is why I'm going to use the predefined credentials because we can just look for Google Docs and connect it. So we don't need parameters, we don't need headers, and we do need a body. So it is a JSON body, and it will not be using fields below. We're going to be using just pure JSON. I'm going to grab that also from this one. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this whole request body, just because it's pretty standard. Most of this stays the same. So let me pull this back up. So let's go ahead and get rid of these real quick. All right, so all of this in white is just going to be the same every time. It expects requests. And then in this case, we're inserting an inline image and the location. So we need to know where to insert the image in the document, like I mentioned. And now we've already set the image index. So we can just drag that in here. Say index is there. So it remembered 18 from before because that's where we found our image placeholder. And now we also need the image to insert. So this is the URI to the image that we're going to insert. So like I mentioned before, we've updated the image so it's shareable. And now we just have to drag it into this. And this URL is a little bit different. So this is how the image would be shared out of Google Drive directly for something like an API. So like if you were to come in here, double click on this and say, oh, you can copy link. If you were to use that link is completely different from the one that we're using in the API. So it's more of the Google Drive interface to look at the image, but the API will not need that. So this URL is not right. Don't use the one from copy link in Google Drive. Instead, you can just use the one that I've hard-coded in here, and I can include that in the description as well. But it's just drive.google.com/UC !ID equals, and then we just go back and grab the image ID. So let me grab that. So we got get image ID from earlier. So we just drag that in here right after the equals, and there we go. So that gives you a URL that looks like this. So this one's quite a bit different from the one I just showed you. So go ahead and show you that this is just the pure image. So there we go. It doesn't go through Google Drive. It just gives you the image directly. So this request is all that we need. So it says, hey, insert the image at index 18 into the document that we specified. So if I go ahead and do that, we've already gotten rid of the placeholder. So if I go ahead and execute this, we should add the image. And there we go. The image has been added. And if, you also might notice like this was kind of small. So I can change that as well. So I just want to point out that object size, height, magnitude, I think is technically pixels. So I think it says points. So it's 100. I'm going to change it to 300. And let's run it again. We should get a bigger image. There we go. So it's a 300 pixel image or point, whatever, relative to the document. But that's how you would change the size. And then that's also how you determine the index, is by just having some way to search within the document of where to put the image. So that's it for Google Docs. So then let's go ahead and move on to Google Sheets. So again, we're searching by file name. So I'm going to do another Google Drive, search files and folders. And going way back to what we did before. So grabbing the slides name out of the Google Sheets and drag it into search query. So we're going to look for a Google Slides document that is adding images, and we're going to limit it to just one. So let's go ahead and search. There we go. Now we have an ID. So I'm going to say get slides ID. All right. And then we can now use the Google Slides node. So we're going to go ahead and get a presentation from Google Slides and drag in the ID for the presentation ID. And go ahead and execute that. And then that should give us all of the content of Google Slides. So Google Slides are a little more visual. So there's a lot more data that's involved in this kind of situation. So it's going to be a little bit trickier to work with, but similar process where we are going to, we don't need to set the placeholder because we already got it. But we do kind of need to find an index basically. And then I think we also need to update the Google slide to get rid of the placeholder because it technically sits in the background. It's not a big deal, I guess, if you don't really care about it, but technically, if you don't get rid of this manually, this will just this image here text will just sit behind the image. So not a big deal, but might as well be thorough about it, especially when it comes to searching for the system. So that could be a bit of an issue. But what I'm going to do is we've got our presentation data, and we only have, at this case, I only have one slide. So you could split it out into slides, but then after that, so let's see, I'm going to go ahead and split out into slides. And then that would give you every slide that's in the document. So in this case, I only have one. And then what I would probably do is filter. So let's go ahead and filter. And we're going to look for, and actually, you know what? I'm actually going to do that again. So instead, I'm going to split out again. So now we've got every slide. we're going to split out into page elements. So we're going to find all the page elements that are available because we're looking for ones in particular. So I'm going to go ahead and split page elements, and that should actually give us quite a few. There we go. So then after that, I'm going to filter for our specific one. So filter, and I'm going to look for and actually I'm just going to grab the content. So in this case, I'm going to use an expression and say JSON dot to JSON string. And if it contains our placeholder, then we want to keep it. So set image placeholder. So there we go. So we're just looking for basically the element in Google Slides somewhere that has our placeholder. So we'll go ahead and do that. So it's not the most efficient way to do it, but it'll work. So we've found our specific section that has our placeholder. So if we scroll down here far enough, you will see content image here. So that's what we were looking for. So now what we need to do is, I believe we just need to call the slide node. So in this case, like we could replace it. So I guess I actually did end up doing that. So we can get rid of that node just to make sure that it's cleaned up. So we could do an HTTP request node here to get rid of that text box because we don't want it anymore. We're going to replace it with an image. So what I want to do is create an HTTP request node again. And this will be to update Google Slides. So we're going to do a post. And then similar situation here where we're going to grab the dynamic URL of the API. So the base is slides.googleapis.com/v1/presentations, and then slash, and then the ID. So in this case, we're getting get a presentation ID. So we're just going to drag in that value from before. And again, I'll have the entire workflow here in a link in the description. So if you need to look through it, you can. But in this case, this is an expression. So we would drag this presentation ID right here after /presentations and right before the colon in batch update so that the API knows, hey, we're going to update that specific presentation. So that's good to go. And then again, with authentication, we can do predefined credentials and then just look for Google Slides. And so it'll just use our existing credentials. And then I'm going to change. So we still want a body content type of JSON, and we're going to do using JSON. And I'm going to head and grab the request from before. I'm going to cheat a little bit here because again, most of the structure is the same. It's expecting a request body. Let me go ahead and expand this a little bit. This requests body, and we're going to replace all text in this case with our placeholder. So we're going to say, hey, find any text that says text, and this is just replacing the text. It's not actually getting rid of that entire box. But it's at least going to clean it up so you don't have just like random text in the background behind the image, just in case there's an issue. So we're going to find the placeholder text. So go ahead and go back down here and drag this in and just say, hey, look for the text of image here and replace it with nothing. So it's going to get rid of that. So we're just back to having an empty text box behind the image. So that one's pretty straightforward. So remove placeholder text. There we go. So that should update that. So it found that text and got rid of it. And so the next thing is to then add the image. So we're going to do another HTTP request to basically the same thing. So we're going to do a post, and then we're going to grab the same URL and drop that in there because it's using the same ID. And then let me grab the data from the last one. So I believe it's the same URL here. And let me grab the request body and I'll go over that. So once we've got that, we're going to set our authentication to predefined credential type. And again, predefined is slides. No params, no headers. We are doing a send body, and the body type is JSON. So we're going to change it to using JSON. And then go ahead and paste in this request body because generally it's the same, not much changes. But this one's a little bit trickier. So again, we are doing the same image from before. So let me get rid of this hard-coded image. And technically you could probably set that as a parameter or set that as an edit field from earlier if you wanted to do that, because we're going to reference it a couple times. But in this case, we could also just drag in the ID. So go ahead and drag in the image, get image ID from way earlier in the flow. And again, this is kind of the hard-coded drive.google.com/UC ID equals the ID of the image. So that way, again, that's the publicly accessible, like API-friendly version of the image that you can download. And then we need to replace the two properties. So we need the project or the page object ID. So we need to know like where, what the page object to get this from, and that's going to come from the filter. So, whoops, yeah. Hang on a second. So there we go. All right. So we've got the slides. We've done the update. Whoops. Got to back up here. So we've got the filtered object ID, and so let's go ahead and change that. So, whoops. So the page object ID is going to be not this one. Page object ID is going to be from the filter. So we found the page object that we want to update. Now, the size is going to come from that page object. So, and then same with the transform. So this is kind of back to the structure of the data from Google Slides, which is not the most intuitive. But essentially, if you remember, we got all the data from the Google Slides presentation. There's a bunch of slides objects, and then there's a bunch of elements inside of those. So we split out into page elements, or at first we split out into slides, and then we split out into page elements. And so now we've found the page element that has the text body that we wanted to replace. And so now what we're going to do is just grab that same element so that we can replace it with the same size. And so it actually works out pretty well here because this text box is 300 by 300. So it ends up working well with matching the image that's a square image. But what I'm going to do is for the size is just drag in. So there's actually a size object here. And this is again coming from that text box. I'm going to drag that in here. And as is, it's just going to look like object. So we're going to do .to JSON string. And so we're just borrowing the details from the existing text box to say this is where the image should go instead. So it's kind of a nice placeholder that way. And then same with the transform. That's all I've done here. So with the transform is the positioning. So it's like where to actually place the image. And again, we're using the position of this text box, which happens to be a nice place to put the image. This will determine where to replace the image. So we're going to grab the transform object here and drag that right in there. And again, that'll look like just an object. So if we do .to JSON string, that gives us the scale and positioning and the details it needs to know where to put the image. And then the size tells you how big to make the image. But that's it for replacing the image. I mean, as far as not actually replacing, we're just creating an image in the slide. So I think that's everything we need for this request. If we go ahead and execute, we should get an image in the document. Oh, maybe not. Oh, hang on. Might need to fix my, oh wait, yeah, that didn't work. Hang on a second. Missed the colon. So the transform needs to go after the colon. There we go. So that should give us a full valid JSON. So let's do that again. That should hopefully add an image to Google Slides. Oh, that's the wrong ID. All right, hang on a second. We've searched for the object ID. So that's a bit of an issue. We need not the object ID from the element. We need the page ID, unfortunately. So let's see if this will work. So it won't be this. It would be this guy, the first one. Page ID. So that should actually work. There we go. All right. So depending on how you structure your slides, and it may be in different spots, so we'll have to reference that ID a little bit differently. But otherwise, that's pretty much it for this. The last step, as I mentioned, was Google Sheets. So if you go ahead and update the row and say, hey, let's update image sources and sheet 1. go ahead and let it map manually. And we're going to match just on row number. That's easy enough. So this is going to go all the way back to the beginning when we did, when we got our row data. Go ahead and drag that in here and say row 2. And we're going to update the status to updated. And then that should finish out the system to be row number 2. And we've changed the status to updated. And that way we know that this row is done. So there we go. There you have it. So that is the full system for not only inserting an image from Google Drive into a Google Doc and Google Slide, but also making sure that the image is shareable in case, when it gets uploaded, it's not set to proper sharing status. So that is pretty much it for this whole system. I will, again, have the entire thing in the description below. So let me know if you have any questions or comments about that system. Hopefully this is helpful. This came from a question on a live stream. So wanted to go ahead and get the system up and running. I've been doing a lot of Google Docs and Google Sheets kind of automations lately, so I figured this was very top of mind. Could be useful. And also been doing some image generation videos with n8n and that kind of thing lately. So maybe it give you a good place to send those documents or send those images once you've got them generated. So let me know if you have any other systems you'd like to see. I really appreciate all the comments and the questions. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.